Ah, medieval castles. Who wouldn't want to live in one, right? Epic parties every night, heroic knights guarding your door, kings and queens strolling through shiny corridors. Sounds amazing, doesn't it? Well, not exactly. It's time to ditch that romanticized vision created by Hollywood and Netflix and face the harsh truth. Life inside medieval castles was much more surviving inside a shared porta-potty filled with rats than an episode of Bridgerton. Yeah, I know, disappointing, right? In reality, these places smelled more like sweat, mold, and open sewage rather than French perfume. And those luxurious feasts you imagine? Trust me, food wasn't always plentiful, and when it was, rats probably got there first. And what about safety? Forget the romantic umbrella of a knight in shining armor. Castles were constantly besieged, attacked, and invaded by enemies eager to turn your home into a medieval human barbecue. Think Game of Thrones, but without the dragons to save the day. And if you thought castle walls were invasion-proof, just remember, they couldn't even keep out rats, cockroaches, or diseases. Honestly, life in a castle was less Disney and more Monty Python. So buckle up. Today, we're diving headfirst into the brutal, hilarious reality of medieval castles. Hey Discovers, real quick before we dive back in, I've got a small favor to ask. If you love historical curiosities, epic battles, crazy mysteries, and mind-blowing stories that most people don't know about, then hit that subscribe button right now. That way, you won't miss any of our new videos and can keep uncovering insane facts every week. And of course, smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow and brings you even more awesome content. Alright, let's jump back into history. Ever complained about how long your kitchen renovation is taking? Well, congratulations. You officially have something in common with medieval royalty. But while your contractor might be taking weeks, medieval castles could take decades, or even centuries, to build. Seriously, imagine hiring someone who tells you, relax, it'll be done in 80 to 100 years, tops. And who was doing all this hard labor? Nobility. Kings and queens in their fancy robes? Nah, they were too busy posing for medieval selfies, also known as oil paintings. Instead, castles were built by an army of peasants, prisoners, and masons working under conditions that would make even OSHA inspectors faint. They hauled stones heavier than your student debt and stacked them higher than your unread emails. Oh, and here's a gross little fact for you. They sometimes mixed animal blood into the mortar. Why? Because medieval people believed it strengthened the construction. And you thought your DIY home projects were sketchy. Speaking of cost, building castles was ridiculously expensive. Kings and lords frequently went bankrupt mid-construction, leaving half-finished castles scattered around Europe like medieval ghost towns. Imagine paying off a mortgage for a house you'll never live to see completed. Yeah, that's medieval financial planning for you. And if you were one of those workers, well, let's just say your life expectancy wasn't exactly great. Chances were you'd die of exhaustion or disease before seeing the castle you spent your entire life building. Talk about job satisfaction. Next time you feel frustrated waiting 3 extra months for your apartment renovations, just imagine waiting an entire lifetime for a building that might never be finished. Perspective, folks. And if you think waiting a century for a finished castle sounds awful, just wait till you hear about what childhood was like inside these stone monstrosities. Remember Hogwarts? Ah yes, a magical school filled with spells, flying broomsticks, and endless adventures. Now, take all that magic and joy, set it on fire, and throw it out the window. Welcome to childhood in a medieval castle. If Hogwarts were real, kids wouldn't be learning to levitate feathers or fight dementors. They'd be cleaning out the Lord's latrine or practicing swordsmanship at 7 in the morning. And no, Professor Snape's mean stares wouldn't be your biggest problem. For noble children, childhood was less about cartoons on Saturday morning and more about learning to stab people effectively. Boys as young as 7 were shipped off to train as squires, basically becoming unpaid interns who learned skills like horse grooming, armor polishing, and dodging flying swords. By the time they were teenagers, they'd probably seen more blood than a Tarantino movie. And the girls? Well, if you thought modern dating was rough, medieval dating made Tinder look like a fairy tale. Noble girls spent their childhoods learning etiquette, needlework, and the art of quietly smiling while being promised to some random nobleman twice their age. Fun times, right? Forget prom night. Your big event was your arranged wedding at 13. Yay, medieval romance. And if you think that's tough, life was even worse for common kids. Forget toys and playgrounds. These kids spent their days hauling firewood, scrubbing floors, and emptying chamber pots. It wasn't uncommon for them to start working at 5 years old. Seriously, while you complained about cleaning your room, medieval children were busy cleaning up after a drunken lord's feast. Sadly, many medieval children never even made it to adulthood. Between disease, accidents, and terrible nutrition, simply surviving childhood was a bigger challenge than beating the final boss in Dark Souls. So next time you complain about homework or chores, just remember, medieval kids would have gladly traded places with you in a heartbeat. But hey, at least these kids were safe behind those thick castle walls, right? Wrong. Castles were constantly under attack, and not even the kids got a break. Think your condo's security guard is strict? Or that your gated community is impenetrable because of that fancy little electronic keypad? Please. Medieval castles laugh at your puny attempts at home security. Medieval castle defenses were the peak of paranoid architecture. Walls thicker than a Kardashian wedding cake and moats filled with water, mud, and, well, let's just say more than water and mud. Unfortunately, contrary to popular belief, moats weren't usually filled with alligators. I know, disappointing, right? But wait, there's more. Castles featured the ultimate medieval gadget, the drawbridge. Think of it as a very dramatic medieval garage door, but instead of opening for your Honda Civic, it slammed shut in the faces of angry invaders. And if that wasn't enough, above the gates were murder holes, literally designed to drop boiling oil, rocks, or even hot sand onto unlucky attackers. Medieval warfare, the original Home Alone defense strategy. Now, how did enemies respond to these elaborate defenses? With equally insane attack strategies, of course. Imagine standing behind your massive stone wall, feeling safe, until suddenly dead bodies come flying over the ramparts. Yup, attackers used catapults to launch not only heavy stones but also diseased corpses. Biological warfare at its nastiest and grossest. And then there were battering rams. No, not fluffy animals with horns. We're talking massive tree trunks swung by angry men desperate to smash through your door. Or how about digging tunnels under the castle walls? Medieval attackers were basically very aggressive human-sized moles with swords. Castle sieges could last weeks, months, even years, turning your supposedly safe fortress into a giant prison. One with dwindling food supplies, rampant disease, and increasingly irritable roommates. And you thought being stuck at home during lockdown was rough. So the next time you complain about your Wi-Fi password being too easy to guess, just remember, medieval security meant dodging flying rocks, flaming arrows, and decomposing bodies. Suddenly, your condo's security seems pretty impressive, huh? But even if you survived the siege, you still had to worry about the ghostly roommates you shared your castle with. Is your former basement a spooky place in your mind? Congratulations! You were greatly outperformed by medieval people. Not only were castles uncomfortable, cold, and often besieged, but they were also teeming with monsters, ghosts, and superstitions that would have Stephen King sleeping with the lights on. Let's start by discussing gargoyles. These eerie stone beings served a purpose beyond decoration. They warded off malevolent spirits. Think of them as the medieval counterpart of a Beware of Dog notice, except that they feature hideous animals with wings and teeth in place of dogs. Simply endearing, isn't it? And that's just scratching the surface. Medieval people genuinely believed their castles could be cursed, especially if someone was violently executed within the walls, which, honestly, happened way more than anyone would like. Imagine buying real estate with the disclosure, minor detail, the previous tenant was beheaded in your bedroom. Happy housewarming! These superstitions were so strong that people placed religious symbols everywhere, hoping saints and angels could prevent hauntings. Spoiler alert, they usually couldn't. In fact, many European castles today still boast a reputation as haunted, with visitors reporting footsteps, ghostly whispers, and apparitions in the dead of night. Basically, if The Shining were set in the Middle Ages, the Overlook Hotel would totally be a creepy castle in Eastern Europe, red rum included. Stories of ghosts weren't just spooky bedtime tales. They were considered everyday realities. Servants avoided certain rooms, guards refused to patrol specific corridors, and even powerful nobles slept with candles burning all night. Who needs Netflix horror movies when your entire home is a live-action paranormal experience? So yes, living in a medieval castle meant sharing your living space with spirits, demons, and possibly a few disgruntled former tenants who just couldn't let go of their eviction, via execution. But before you run screaming from your ghostly roommates, remember, if the paranormal didn't kill you, the freezing cold, filth, and relentless misery definitely could. Seriously, you'd start wishing ghosts were your only problem. Alright, it's time to burst your fantasy bubble. Medieval castles weren't luxurious vacation homes. Hollywood lied. Disney lied. Even Braveheart lied. Castles weren't spacious, bright, or comfortable. They were basically low-budget hostels, but without Wi-Fi and with significantly more rodents. You know those beautifully decorated halls filled with elegant tapestries, warm fireplaces, and cozy corners from fantasy films? Replace that with freezing stone walls, narrow rooms stuffed with people, and enough smoke to trigger every smoke alarm in your neighborhood, if medieval people even had smoke alarms. Most rooms had zero natural lighting, so you spent your days stumbling around in near-total darkness. Candles were expensive, and windows were tiny, because windows were basically holes in your walls where arrows could come flying through. Cozy, right? And heating. If you weren't rich, forget about it. Only nobles had the privilege of a fireplace in their chambers. The servants and soldiers got to experience winters colder than your ex's heart, often sleeping on straw-covered floors, hoping hypothermia wouldn't finish them off overnight. Oh, and did I mention hygiene? Medieval castles had fewer baths than your average college dorm. Servants shared crowded sleeping quarters and rarely changed their clothes. Imagine living permanently inside your gym socks. Yep, that's medieval freshness. Food wasn't exactly gourmet either. Forget elaborate feasts. Most meals consisted of tough bread, questionable stew, and meat that smelled suspiciously like it was cooked last month. Gourmet dining, medieval style, meant chewing meat until your jaw begged for mercy and praying your stomach survived the night. Privacy. Good luck with that. Entire families and their servants often shared one large room. So forget quiet time or personal space. Everyone knew your business, from marital disputes to digestive issues. Think reality TV, but without cameras and way more awkward. So next time you fantasize about living in a medieval castle, remember, reality was far closer to a cheap Airbnb disaster than Cinderella's castle at Disneyland. Still dreaming of life in a castle? If so, I admire your optimism. Alright, let's do a quick recap of medieval castles. Construction took longer than your student loans to pay off, and involved blood, literally. Childhood, basically a career internship that started at age 5. Childhood dreams? Cancelled. Defense systems, great at keeping invaders out. Unless, of course, the invaders had catapults, battering rams, or dead bodies handy. Hauntings. Superstitions and ghosts were so common, you'd beg for your house to be just haunted by rats instead. Living conditions. Colder, darker, and smellier than a poorly rated motel room you rented by accident. So, yeah, medieval castles were less fantasy and more brutal reality. Movies and TV shows might romanticize them, but trust me, living in one would make you appreciate your cramped apartment or suburban home like never before. Seriously, the next time you complain about slow internet or cold pizza delivery, just think, at least your home isn't under siege, haunted, or filled with plague-ridden rodents. Perspective, folks. Now, I have to ask you, the brave viewer who survived this video, would you still want to live in a medieval castle? Could you handle the smells, ghosts, constant attacks, and non-existent plumbing? Let me know in the comments below. And hey, if you enjoyed this brutally honest journey through history, smash that like button, subscribe for more sarcastic history adventures, and remember, history is way more fun when you keep it real.